Have you ever thought about making a change and deliberated? Should I, shouldn't I? And you've gone out and asked various people about whether you should make that decision, or you should adopt a new behaviour, or you should do something different. Deliberated. Or maybe you're a coach or a therapist and you work with clients who are uncertain as to whether to go in one direction or the other direction, which way to turn, what to do. As a coach and a therapist, I see myself as being more a facilitator. I'm not one for giving people advice in the sense that advice can be very subjective. And what we're going to do tonight, we're going to look at a technique, a process called a cost-benefit analysis. It's basically behavioural economics when we're sort of weighing up change. Should I, shouldn't I? And I'm sure you've been in that situation yourself. I certainly have. I'm sure the clients, if you're a therapist or a coach, or you've got even friends or even family that you talk to, and not quite sure what to do, whether they should change. Alternatively, you might be one of the sort of people who is a good listener and you like giving advice, and after you've given advice you wonder why people don't change because you're seeing it subjectively. Alternatively, I might be giving you advice and you might be looking for advice. Maybe in this situation we've looked for advice, you've gone out there, you've got a particular issue or problem, you want to make a change, whatever that change might be, and you've asked various people. One person told you one thing, one the other, someone something else. Have you been there before where you just can't quite get your head around who has the best interest or who's got the best advice for you? Now, this process we're going to cover tonight is a useful process for you to be clear and get some sort of clarity. And as a coach or a therapist, you can help your clients get some clarity in their own mind. The definition of insanity, doing the same thing over again and expect a different result, Einstein said. Or so they say he said. Yet, you can understand that philosophy when you think about it. How many times have you done the same thing over again and over again? Who's done that before? Whatever it might be. And you expect a different result. You do the same thing over again, or your clients, they do the same thing over and over again. The same repetition behaviour. The same repetitive behaviour over and over again for one reason or the other. It could be they're in a relationship that doesn't serve them anymore and they feel stuck and they keep going back to their old partner. It could be they're in a job they don't like no more. They've got an outlet, an opportunity to go on and move forward, but they go back to that job. It could be that they are suffering from negative emotion and they keep going back to the old emotion. They've got the opportunity to change. We all have the option, an opportunity to make changes. Yes, of course, we've all got different circumstances in life, yet we all have the option to make a change if we choose to do so. It's not to say that change is always going to be the right thing, yet if we're stuck in a certain area, it makes sense to make a decision, to move, at least do something. Many people spend their life stuck. They don't evaluate their life in any way, shape or form, and life passes them by. We're going to do this really good process tonight to help get some clarity. This process requires you to come off the treadmill of life and evaluate the situation, or help your clients to evaluate what the situation is. Because more often than not in life, we're on this treadmill. We go to work, we come home, we watch some TV, we go to work, we come home, we watch TV, and whenever we've got a bit of time off, we just want escapism. Whether you go out, have a few drinks, or you go away on the occasional holiday, we sometimes struggle to face reality, and we're faced with situations in our life all the time. Now, escapism will only work for so long. It's like trying to put a plaster on a big gaping wound. What we need to do in certain situations is sometimes face reality. Face reality and see the wood through the trees. Have you ever been in that situation where you felt you haven't or can't see the woods through the trees? And be honest with yourself. I've been in times myself where I've not wanted to see the woods, so to speak, through the trees. So you can imagine your clients. Think about the emotions, if you're a therapist or a coach, that your clients are going to go through. What do you think some of the emotions your clients will go through on the roller coaster ride emotionally? They're going to be angry, frustrated, scared, all these emotions your clients are going to experience through the course of their life, transitional phase in their life. They're going to go through various problems. And what they need at some point is for someone to guide them and facilitate them to work things out for themselves. Your clients need to accept some level of personal responsibility for the situation they are in. Because only you, as an individual, can change the circumstances you're in to a point. Yeah, people can help you, yet we must work on the premise that there's going to be no salvation. Plenty of people out there looking for that salvation, for that person or people to come along and take them out of the situation they're in. It's your mind, and you're in control of your mind, and your clients control their own mind. And at some point they need to accept they are responsible and accountable for their own actions. A lot of people these days, and we're seeing it more and more, want people to give them advice, to tell them what to do, how to do it. You see so many books on the market, personal development books, you see seminars, programs on TV, people telling other things what they shouldn't do with their life. Yet in the end, it's only you and you only that knows what's important to you, what you want out of your life, and move forward and go for it. Many people want to pass responsibility for their life because they don't want to accept responsibility, accountability. A lot of people don't want to put their hand up and say, I am the common denominator. I am the one. If I'm in the situation I'm in, I'm going to get myself out of this situation. And you want to empower your clients to make their own decisions in life, because at some point in your life you've got to stand tall and walk tall and put your shoulders back and face reality. Now, it can be pretty scary making a change. Have you ever made a change in your life before? And it's been quite scary. Have you ever thought, well, familiarity, better than the devil I know. Familiarity breeds contempt. As adults, we like familiarity. We like things to stay the same. Even if they're not serving us no more, we still like a level of familiarity, because familiarity breeds contempt. We like the known. We like to know. We like routine as human beings. Example of that is, think of a 2-year-old. If you've got your own children or had children that were 2-year-old who've grown up now, or you've got nieces and nephews, think of a 2-year-old. What does a 2-year-old do a lot of? What's a 2-year-old do a lot of? A 2-year-old asks a lot of questions. Why? Why this? Why that? Why this? Why that? Continually asking questions. Because as a 2-year-old, you're curious, and curiosity is good. Curiosity, we evolve, because after confusion that curiosity brings comes clarity, and we learn. A 2-year-old or a baby, from the day it's born, learns to walk, to talk, to function consciously eventually, and it learns from the people around it, beliefs and values, and it becomes an adult eventually, or it moves into childhood, then into teenage and into adulthood. But those first 7 years in the life of a child are key, because that's what we call the imprint phase. We're very raw, our filters, the way we process for our values and beliefs, we don't really have an awareness of anything, only having what we're told. Imagine you took 2 twins, you took one twin and put it in one environment, one in the other. If they were different extremes, no doubt they would be very heavily influenced by the environment they're in. So we are influenced by environment to a strong degree. Yet more to the point, as a young child we embrace confusion. We're not afraid of it. We keep asking questions. Yet as we get older, what happens through, in my opinion, the schooling system. Now, those of you who know me, you've been to my seminars, I've been a teacher myself. I think teachers do a great job and a lot of constraints, but the school system is quite flawed, I believe. It needs a major overhaul. It's very outdated. It's very industrial revolution. People are afraid to make mistakes. They're afraid to put their hand up and ask a question. Because if you get a question wrong in school, how does the teacher react? How does the teacher react when you got a question wrong in school? They get frustrated, you get frustrated, vice versa, and then through time, through your schooling life, you start getting graded. One person is in one level, you're in another level, and we build self-esteem issues. And really, in the end, when you think about school as a general rule, it's more of a test in memory. You've got to write examination. It's very non-creative in the sense when you're going out there and doing things that are real in the big wide world, so to speak. But that's another story for another day. But the reason I mention that is because as an adult, you start becoming afraid of being confused. You're afraid. So I won't ask no questions. Who's been on the course? I bet you've been in the course at some point in your life and you've been too afraid to put your hand up and ask a question. You've been too afraid to ask a question because you think, you know what, if I ask a question and get it wrong, everyone's going to turn around and ridicule me. And it's almost like going back to school. You're too afraid. If I ask that question, and really, there's no daft question, so to speak. If you don't know, the chances are people don't know as well. So I encourage people to ask questions. You might appear a fool to some people for a few seconds, but better to be a fool for a few seconds to ask what some would consider being a foolish question than be a fool for life, like a lot of people are. They put their hand down and too afraid to put their neck on the line. Just go out there. And I encourage you, if you're watching this seminar, to ask questions, to learn and grow, because after confusion comes clarity. Now, what's even scarier than change is, or not changing, so to speak, is regret. I think most people can accept some of the things that happened in their life, whatever it might be. What we do generally regret things that we didn't do. And we had a chance to do it, I think, personally, in my opinion. Having worked for many people, thousands of people over many years in coaching and therapy, I've worked for a broad range of areas, high-level business people, athletes, therapy, self-harm, substance misuse, pretty much everything you could ever imagine I've worked with. And I can only say for all these I've been doing it, one thing I would say is the people who don't do certain things, who end up having regrets in life eventually. I think, well, had I done this? Had I asked that person out? Had I gone for that job? All the things that we sort of play it safe. Because life passes you by pretty quickly. You're not going to be around for a million years. We're here for a very short time in the grand scheme of things. So sometimes, within reason, obviously, we have to sometimes play it safe because life, the way it is, isn't always easy. It can be very challenging. It's always good sometimes to say, you know what, let's have a go. And that ties into tonight's technique. Because tonight's technique gives you a chance to evaluate the situation. You evaluate the situation, and as a result, familiarity, it does breed level of content. Because when you're familiar with certain things in your life, it's safe. It's safe to get up and go to a job, even if you don't like it, that pays the bill. It's safe to come home to a partner, even if you're not happy, to know they're going to be there, and you might be more afraid of being on your own than being with somebody you're not happy with. It's safe to go through the motions to a certain degree. Yet in saying that, that works for some people. That's fair enough, each to their own. I don't say how you should and shouldn't live your life. That's your call. But what I would say, sometimes it makes sense to step back. Because on the other side, I'm not one to advise you, my clients, anybody else for that matter, the right and wrong way to live. We give life a meaning. If we're going to be philosophical about things, what does life mean anyway? It's your call in the end. And I say it's your call and you decide in the end what's right and wrong for you. And sometimes you make decisions and you've got to hold your hand up. I've done plenty of those, but hold my hand up, I was wrong. Or in hindsight, I might have done things differently. But in saying that, that's part of life and learning. You're not going to go through life unscathed, one would think, anyway. Familiarity is safe, and it requires a lot of energy to change. Changing a pathway, changing a pattern in your brain requires a lot of energy. Those first 7 years are very influential, instrumental in forming our neurology, our mindset. The child is half the man, so they say. If you believe it's true, so they say. But I have proven for neuroplasticity we can change by building new pathways. But that requires effort and energy. You're not going to read one book and life's going to be happily ever after, or go to one seminar or do one session. Yes, you can make an impact and you can sort of go and put yourself on a different road, but I believe, as you're probably well aware if you've been to my seminars, been to my talks, it's an ongoing process. You've got to keep working. Just like you wouldn't eat one nutrition meal and be healthy forever. You wouldn't do one training session and great. You've got to keep doing it. And same applies to mental training. You've got to keep working at it. You've got to keep working at it, otherwise you degenerate, one would think, for sure. So to build these pathways requires energy and effort. And people, for the most part, don't have the energy and effort, or want to make the energy and effort to make the change, for the most part, because the leverage is in there. Why should I change? What's the benefit in changing? What's the point in changing? And that's why I ask for advice. What do you think I should do? What should I do? Should I take this job? Should I go with this person? Should I make this change? Should I deliver this presentation? Should I? And they're not shooting all over themselves. They've got to make a concrete decision. And one way to evaluate that is what we're going to do tonight. A powerful process we'll do tonight. Now, sometimes certain people get secondary gain. You've got to appreciate that some of your clients are going to get what we call secondary gain. They thrive off the adulation of having the issue. Some people, they might not be aware of it. I'm sure you've met people like that in the past, at work, or some of your clients, where it's almost having an issue, having the problem, always gives them a sense of attention, a sense of gain, an emotional gain. There's a payoff. You know, the sort of person who you might see across the other side of the street smiling and whistling, and then when they catch your attention, oh, how you doing? Straight away they put their head down, oh, my knee's so sore, I've got a sore elbow. Or, you know, that sort of person who when you sort of catch them laughing even or happy for 5 minutes, they've got to put that sort of face back on again, where they like being the victim subconsciously. They like being the person with the issue. They like being the person who's done hard done to. They like being the person that goes into work and on a Monday morning walks in like this. Have you seen them? Oh, how was your weekend? Oh, well, this is what my weekend. My weekend was like this. And the victim. You met that sort of person before, and they've got to make a decision for themselves. Because these sort of people can be energy vampires. They can sap every ounce of energy you've got. They can sap every ounce of energy you've got and everybody else around them. And the analogy I use, if someone is drowning in the water, and the water's very deep, it's 10 foot deep, and you can't swim. You can't swim, and you dive into that water. What do you think is going to happen? What do you think is going to happen if you dive in the water and the person can't swim? What do you think will happen? Well, obviously, there's a very good chance you'll drown, and so will they. And if somebody else jumps in who can't swim as well, you'll all go. Now, the logical thing to do, one would think, is to get something to reach out. If you've got a stick for them to reach out and pull them out of the water, do you think they'll grab it? Do you think they'll grab it? Well, if they value their life, they would. Yet in saying that, you can't control that. Give me the strength to control what I can and let go what I can't. You can't control that. You can't control whether someone who's getting a big payoff from having the issue they've got decides to want to make the change. All you can do is facilitate by using a process we're going to do tonight and other processes that you might have as well, and get them to decide. Do I go forward or do I stay where I am? And there's a danger, you might, as a good friend to people who enjoy being the victim and get a big payoff from the issue they've got, think you're being a good friend doing that, sometimes you're putting more fuel to the fire. Imagine a fire brewing, is you're pouring petrol to keep it going. Sometimes the best things you can do is don't draw attention to the actual issues they've got. Yeah, we all like to be a friend to people, and I'm sure I certainly like to have a good moan every now and again, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with venting, yet as long as you don't stay there. And that's the key, finding that balance. If you stay there, it's not a good idea. And I've met a lot of people through a lot of sessions over many, many years, they get such a strong payoff for being the victim or a secondary gain, and it might be even unconscious, they might not even be aware of it. For example, they might self-harm, and they self-harm because they can draw attention to themselves for various reasons. And I'm saying every self-harm is for that reason. There's many reasons, underlying reasons why someone might or might not self-harm, but potentially some people might self-harm, for example, because once they self-harm, they might get rushed to A&E and they get fussed over and they get a lot of attention and they go back home and people... Not saying everybody like that, but that's giving an example of where this could apply. Or it could be someone who has an issue with a problem, it could be an anxiety, or it could be a form of depression, and that's not sort of putting any light on depression, because depression can be a very debilitating condition. We know that, and I know that more than anyone, having many people who've got depression. But what I would say, what is depression and what's not depression, is having periods where we feel sad, which is normally a natural depression, or is the debilitation. How do we grade debilitation? Yeah, there are many ways to do that. You've got to decide. There are certain days I wake up and I'm not on top form, like know that you are and anybody else, but I wouldn't consider that as being depression, and I'm not proactive. I might speak to dummy for a little while, but I'll go out for a walk and do something and be proactive, and you wouldn't probably call that depression, but you would call that state. And that's what we're going to draw a fine line. And you'll get people who, for one reason or the other, whatever the condition they have, that's not putting light in conditions, because even when people have got conditions, sometimes we like a shoulder to cry on and some support and someone to talk to, and that's fine. I encourage people to talk to people who've got an issue you're going through. Yet what I would say, at some point you've got to seek a way forward and be proactive, and so do your clients for that matter. But at what point you do that, well, each person's different. Resilience is different for different people. So I think that's an area where, as a therapist and the coach, you've got to use your skill. And as an individual, if you're going through any issue, the key is for you to evaluate that and know when you're ready for change. Because being ready for change is, I would say, half the battle won, so to speak. So really, the long and short of it is, going forward, is you can use the following process to examine the advantages of change and the disadvantages of change. You could come to me with an issue, whatever the issue might be, and say, Jim, what do you think I should do? With all your infinite wisdom, you've been a therapist for many years, a coach, what should I do? I don't know you well enough to give you any advice, in the sense that you know where you are in the context of the issue. Now, what's really important too is to define what the issue is. You've got to be very clear on what the problem is, define it. And also what you've got to do too is decide on what outcome you want, what degree of functionality you want. Now, to give you an example, I was working with a guy a year ago, and he was contemplating getting into a relationship again, a personal relationship. And he came along to me and he said that what he would do every time he got into a relationship with a woman, he was a man, he's a woman, he said he would find a way to sabotage it. Whenever he felt really happy, he'd find a way to sabotage the relationship because he was afraid. He was afraid that, or he was afraid of losing the feeling of being happy. He was afraid of what he might lose. He was afraid, and we talked and we did some work together and got to the point of what the issue was, which I won't go into too much detail because of time. But the issue was, and the outcome was, he wanted a relationship, and what he wanted to do, and we defined the problem, was that there'd be a point in the relationship where he felt happy, things were going too well, he'd start doing things to sabotage a relationship. He'd start doing some behaviours. This is where we still define what the behaviours are you want to change. He wouldn't return his partner at the time calls back, he wouldn't text back, he'd arrive late for when they had a night out. He'd find little ways to sabotage a relationship till the point the person just got fed up and said, look, I can't deal with this anymore. And you can fully appreciate that some people will put up with so much, but in the end, with all the will in the world, when this continually happens, if someone's giving and giving in any relationship, whatever it might be, eventually it's like a seesaw, it's going to go to one level, and one person's going to eventually get off at some point, one would think, in most circumstances. Now, this is just not confined to relationships, it can be confined to a lot of different things we sort of explore throughout this evening as we go along. Now, I've got a short space of time. I generally do this over a longer period of time in a workshop, but I can give you enough information in the time that we've got, roughly an hour, for you to take away and read and research and do some work and start familiarising yourself with this process and start using it in a formal and an informal way, which is key. We've got to remember as well that we do things for a reason. We do a lot of things for a reason. So, for example, someone might smoke. You could consider that as being a behavioural action. You smoke. Yet in saying that, what's driving that smoking? It could be fulfilling an emotional need. It could be under high levels of stress, because no one smokes every second of every day. It could be emotional need. It could be we eat the wrong foods. It could be throughout the day you eat really, really well. Then you come home at night. A woman I was working with a year ago, what she would do, she was very successful in business, done very well for herself in business, very intelligent academic woman. She'd eat really well during the day. Her goal was, her outcome was to lose some weight or get to a certain weight anyway, to reduce her size, whatever it was at the time, and she wanted to reduce 2 or 3 stone, 2.5 stone. The irony was that she would eat really well for the most part, train and do well, yet when she got home at night, she'd feel lonely, she was living on her own, and what she would do is eat a lot of processed food, chocolate cake, and the reason why she did that, as we sort of like unravel and did 3 different techniques and processes, was that when she was very young, 5, 6-year-old, whenever she had any issues, her mum would feed her chocolate, whatever, here's a chocolate, take that, and she associated, she was what we call an emotional eater, love with that chocolate. So you examine a number of things there. You could leverage the emotion, you could talk about the behaviour, and you can put it in what we call the cold light of day by doing this process and make an informed decision. With that, we worked with her and eventually she achieved the outcome she wanted to do. We did other stuff like regression to deal with the emotion looked at behavioural patterns and options. So this process is really, really good to give you a chance to evaluate and have a look and get a very clear picture of what the benefits and the pros and cons are of making that change. And you might be saying to yourself now, well, what if someone decides, having done this, not to make the change? Well, that you could say success in its own right, because it gives us a chance to be more aware on a conscious level as to what's going on unconsciously. Now, success is living life on your terms or achieving the outcome you want to a certain degree. So, for example, if the guy comes along to me and says he doesn't want a relationship, that's the outcome, he's not bothered about the relationship, then the behaviour is not a problem, is it? Is it not? Okay, so where it's an issue, if you've got an outcome and you're not achieving the outcome because an existing behavioural pattern that you do is preventing you from reaching the outcome, or an emotion, or an attitude, or a belief, for that matter, is getting in the way of you going from A to B, then you have a potential issue. If it's a cognitive distortion, which I can send you more information on if you want me to via email. We don't have time to go into each distortion. So you could class it as being a negative thinking pattern in the context of us wanting to achieve an outcome, so to speak. So you examine the pros and cons. Now, to do this process effectively, get a pen and paper. If you can get a pen and paper, I'll be ever so grateful, because to embed this learning, you need to get a pen and paper. We're going to do this technique shortly. I'm going to keep it very interactive. I'm not going to go on for too long. I want you to get a pen and paper and go through the process. So you've got to decide the implications of your behaviour. And you can make the decision long-term and short-term, long-term. The advantage and disadvantage. If I carry on doing what I've always done, I know one thing's for sure, I'll keep getting what I've always got. But the other side to it, if something's not broken, there's no need to fix it as well, so to speak. And sometimes we might not be ready for change. We might not be ready for change. There's a guy who came and saw me a year ago, who was bereaving. His wife had passed unexpectedly, very young. They had their whole life ahead of him. He had 2 young children, and he was hoarding and keeping pictures of her and keeping all her belongings, and a couple of months had gone by, and he was functional to the point that he was there for his kids, he was taking them to school, he appeared to be relatively functional, he was working and holding it together. Obviously he was going through a very tough time emotionally, and he says to me, when will this behaviour stop? When will I change this behaviour? When should I start changing the behaviour? And it's very hard to give anyone advice. Everything affects people in different ways, in different situations. I reassured him he was doing well to the extent that the outcomes he wanted, that he said he wanted to be there for his kids and to be functional at work. And whilst I'm not one to give advice, I could demonstrate that what he was aiming to do, he was achieving. Now, whether that behaviour was the right or wrong thing to do, it's his call at that point. Put the ball back in his court. Now, in that situation, you've got to know your client really well, or that's where you earn your money as a therapist and a coach. You've got to assess the situation. I didn't think it was the right thing to do, going on this path. What I said in that situation, if you go away and just think about the situation you want to change, when you've got time to, between now and we'll have a chat next week about moving forward, then we'll redress the issue. Sometimes people do need some sort of reassurance in different situations. As I said earlier before, it's not always cut and dry, and you've got to be flexible in your approach as a therapist, as a coach. People aren't robots, they're not machines. In certain situations, you're not going to get this straight out and say, bang, here you go. What you've got to do is assess every situation what it is as a coach, because not every situation is going to be the same. People aren't mechanical. Now, we go through emotions all the time, and what we can do is not only can we assess our behaviour short-term and long-term, we can also assess our behaviour, our emotions as well. And the emotions are linked to our behaviour. Our emotions generally are the driving force, you could argue, behind our behaviour. What's first, the chicken or the egg? Well, I suppose it all begins with a situation, an activation, a trigger, and between that trigger are a series of beliefs and schemas, and then we have our thoughts about the situation. Then that's going to trigger an emotional, behavioural, physical response. So for example, you might come home one day and your partner leaves you a note that says, "I've decided to leave you." Your thoughts are, "I might not find anyone ever again." You feel down emotionally. Your belief is you might not find anyone else again, and your thoughts feed off that, and then you start seeing yourself on your own for the next 20 years with nobody, sad, devastated, emotionally feel down. Behaviourally, you become withdrawn. Physiologically, you become lethargic, sluggish, and that cycle continues. Ultimately, you might come home and think, "The note's there, great, I wish I'd have gone earlier." Now, I don't want to be condescending in that view, but if that were the case, you'd see it differently. You'd sort of probably go out and party and enjoy yourself. And now, maybe not to that extreme, but you might come home and decide, "You know what, if they don't want to be with me, it's probably for the best." And bit by bit, you build your life back up again. So you've got to decide as well emotionally how that emotion is serving you. Because some people carry and harbour these emotions for a long time. But the same thing applies again. It's not always as cut and dry as that. Because emotions are stored in the limbic part of our brain, the hippocampus, and the more traumatic the experience, the higher and the more powerful an impact it can have on us. For example, you see people talking about things that happened years ago. They might have fought in the war 50 years ago. When they talk about it in their conscious awareness, they start to cry. It still evokes certain memory. So we code time emotionally as well. So you've got to decide. Time's not really a healer, because we don't code time chronologically. What is the decision to make the change is key. Are we ready to make that change? And the consequences of that change. And the consequence of that emotion. If you go on feeling angry forever, guilty forever, sad forever, there'll be a consequence. At some point you've got to decide, do I move on and move forward? What do I do? The other thing as well we can look at is thoughts, attitudes, and we talked about belief. Is that belief useful to me? Is the attitude useful to me? I say to people, if you can change two things immediately with any outcome, any goal, is your attitude and your emotion you'll experience when you achieve the goal. Think of an outcome you want. You might want to be in a relationship, you might want to be your own business, a certain outcome you want to achieve, and think about the emotion around experiencing that outcome and the attitude you need to achieve the outcome. You can do that immediately. That might not get you to the goal, it'll definitely take you towards the goal. Now the key is you've got to decide, are those beliefs useful for me? So someone might believe, I'll always be poor, I'll always be sad. That's not for me. I wasn't cut out for that. I'm not made for a relationship. All these, when we mentioned briefly earlier, these cognitive distortions that come from automatic thoughts, we might catastrophize and think, if I lose that job, I could end up living on the street. We might generalize and think, well, all women are like this, all men are like that. We might decide that, have a mental filter where you do a presentation, 95% of people say it was great, one person says I don't like the presentation you did, and you stew on that. I'm not going to go into too much detail. I'll do a seminar on its own on cognitive distortions in the next few months, and if you want a PDF, I've written some more details on that, you can have that. I'm just highlighting that point. We've got to decide, is that belief serving me anymore? And one of the ways to do that is not ask somebody else who's, in a general way, healed at the wound. More often than not, what we do when we look for advice, we look for people to reinforce our belief. We believe what we want to believe. So we believe that we're not good for a relationship, we'll find people who can reinforce male or female a certain way. If we believe we're always going to be poor, we'll find people who are and talk about money being a bad thing. If we believe that we're not going to amount to whatever, we'll find people. Sometimes we seek comfort, and the key is to come out of that comfort zone and find people who are where you want to go and talk to them and see what their view of the world is. Change your perspective, change your world. So we say, so get the pen and paper, I'm going to talk you through the process. If you get the pen and paper, I'm going to guide you through the process. It can be done formally and informally. It's entirely up to you. It can be done informally or formally. The way I did this process informally a while ago, to give you an idea, an illustration of how it works, I was driving one day and I picked up my friend. I was going from Manchester to London to do an event, and my friend was coming along with me to the event. And he says to me, "Jim, I don't know what to do. I'm in this relationship, I don't know if I should carry on, or if I should stay, I don't know what to do." And at about 5 o'clock in the morning, or probably even earlier than that as I'm setting off to London, it's not the best time to ask me for any advice on any issue, not that I like to involve people's personal problems anyway. And I'm listening to the radio, as you do, got some music going, and it was a nice summer morning, early morning, really, really bright. Those nice summer mornings where it's really, really bright, and the sun's coming, rising up early, and it's just nice and warm and fresh. You've got the window down, cruising along. And I said to my colleague, to illustrate the process work, is first of all you've got to define what it was you want to change. You've got to clearly define what you want as an outcome, but also define what the actual issue is. And I just said, well, what exactly is the issue? What's the problem? And the problem, so he said, was he'd been in this relationship on and off, and he was deliberating whether he wanted to stay in that relationship or go it alone, and whatever he had in mind to do, explore the world and all the things that he had and was considering doing. So I'm not really one to give advice in that situation, but what I did do is just say, okay, what's the possible short-term making the change? So if you do go on your own, you do what you decide you want to do, what are the advantages of making the change? Short-term, long-term, and he just waffled on and waffled on and waffled on. And that time in the morning, like I said, I'm not the best person to speak to, and I let him carry on with himself. Then the negative, because of the negatives as well, of making the change, short-term and long-term. What's the negative consequences of making the change? And he'd carry on with himself and go on and on and on, as you do. And this was an informal way until we got towards the end. We just having dialogue and evaluating the pros and cons. Well, if I do this, that, and the other, and I barely said a word other than facilitate, said a few sentences, and just fired back and paraphrased some of the things that he said. And in the end, going forward, he decides, didn't really say a great deal then. You can see him mulling over in his own mind. A couple of weeks later, he says to me, Jim, gives me a call. You gave me the best advice ever. I've made a decision what I'm going to do. And at that point, I thought, hang on a second here. I didn't give you any advice. I just facilitated. You found the answers for yourself. So the key is sometimes listening and facilitating is key. Whilst I didn't give any advice, what I did do is I fired questions and put in his conscious awareness. Because he's got to make his own decision in the end. I can't tell you what's right and wrong for you. That's the key. But what this process does is help us to sort of put things in the light of day. So what I want to do is get your pen and paper. You do it formally. Sometimes what I do with people I work with, I get like a flip chart, and we can do it, the very visual, or just a pen and paper, or like I said, it can be informal, just in conversation you want to. And it can apply for almost anything. So what I want you to do now, going forward, what I want you to do is choose a behaviour, an emotion, a thought, attitude, a belief you're considering changing. Okay? So just choose a behaviour, an emotion, a thought, attitude, a belief you are considering changing. If you've got that, write it down. Okay, one more time. Choose a behaviour, an emotion, a thought, attitude, a belief that you're considering changing, and write it down. Now, choose one for now, for simplicity. Then you can go forward. Once you've chosen that, what I want you to do is be very clear in identifying what it is you want to change. We mentioned it could be a thought, an emotion, a behaviour, an attitude, a belief. Be very clear in identifying. And one of the ways to help you to identify, define the problem. What is the problem? What is the issue? What outcome do you want? Be very clear. When you decide and you write down, be very clear specifically what it is. Be very specific what the actual issue is. The clearer you are, the better. So you can decide maybe a certain emotion you feel when you see an ex-partner, or when you've got to get up and go to work in the morning. It might be when you deliver presentations, you get a negative emotion. It might be you go for an interview. It could be a behaviour. Maybe you are aggressive towards someone or somebody or people. It could be you behave in an erratic certain way. It could be a belief you've got, a negative belief you have, about people or yourself or the world or whatever. It could be an attitude you have. Be very clear about what it is, and this you can do for yourself, and once you've done it for yourself, you can then help facilitate your clients. So you've got that, and you've written it down. The next step we're going to do is evaluate the change. I want you to evaluate the change, okay? So let's first of all, you've written that down, look at the keeping things as they are. I want let's work on this basis first of all. If you keep things the way they are, if you keep the behavior, the belief, the attitude, or the emotion and the thought that you have at the moment, let's examine what are the positives, short term, keeping things as they are. Now write down as many things you can think of. Now, because of time, we don't have a long time this evening to do the full process, but it will set you in the right direction, and you've got the video, it'll be uploaded, you can watch it and reevaluate it and reassess it. But what I want you to do is just write a couple of things. The positives in keeping things as they are, whatever you chose, you're considering changing, and the positives long term. This helps you to put it in the cold light of day. Okay? So the positives short term, the positives long term, the negatives short term, and the negatives long term of keeping the behavior. Remember, it's keeping the emotion, the behavior, the belief, or the attitude. For simplicity, if you're struggling to find a list of things, see if you can find one thing, and then you can go so on and so forth. With your clients, be very patient. Be very patient with them. Give them time to think. If they've got to go away and think about it and come back and do it again, it's not a test. They've got to be very clear when they evaluate. So it could be you might want to change a behaviour that you do. It could be, I mentioned earlier, the guy who found a way to push potential partners away and would do stuff like not reply to text, not return calls, behave abruptly. Now, the positive short term, you might think there's no positive short term. Well, in this situation, it kept him safe. He was afraid of rejection. The positive long term for him in this situation, well, he thought, well, I'm comfortable being as I am. I've been hurt before, so it happened, and he was afraid of being hurt again. That was the positive long term. The negative short term of keeping it as they are was he really enjoyed being in a relationship and could appreciate every relationship's got good and bad. And then long term, well, when he really thought about it, he was the type of person who got to a point where he felt he was ready to be in a relationship. Whereas in the past, he might have been a bit younger, and not that that matters, but he was in a situation where he had other priorities. He felt it was in a stage of his life where he was very clear about what he wanted and how he wanted to live his life. So negatives of staying that way, it could potentially be on for a long time, and really, is that really what he wanted? And by seeing that, you can look at what your client writes down, and you can go over some of the stuff, which we won't get time to go over this evening, but we'll do a seminar that involves going over the evaluation in more detail at a later date. But for now, let's just keep it very clear, and you've got that part there, okay? Keeping things as they are. Keeping things as they are, evaluating. And that could be, even if you're a personal trainer, you're a fitness coach, a nutritionist, the same thing can apply. If I carry on eating that chocolate cake, the positive short term, positive long term, negative short term, negative long term, but carry on not going to the gym, the positive short term, well, I can come home and just chill out. Positive long term, well, I don't have to go to the environment I don't enjoy going into. The negative short term, well, I'm not going to get in shape for that wedding I want to be in, or I'm not going to get in shape, or the health benefits. Negative long term, maybe the health risk on a long term basis. And you can then evaluate stuff. And you might be thinking at this point, why would you do that? Well, you want to see what the trade-off is. You want to see on a conscious level what the situation is. But then you can also do making the change. Now let's talk about making the change. So if you make the change, the guy I mentioned earlier about wanting to be in a relationship, but he was sabotaging him, if he makes the change, the positive short term would be he would enjoy a relationship a lot more, be in the moment, just live the moment. The reality, we cannot control the non-controllables. Whether someone's going to leave or you're going to leave in the end, nothing stays permanent anyway. Better to love or lose, not to love at all. And that's a more philosophical way of looking at it. The positive short term, he was free. He wasn't consistently finding a way. Just let it be and flow and enjoy and let nature take its course. And long term, the positive was he was going to give us the best opportunity to find somebody, just be himself, be natural, his own identity, rather than put this different hat on, so to speak, and he behaved in a way that wasn't even conducive to who he was as an identity point of view. Negatives of making a change short term, well, potentially he left himself in a situation where he could get hurt, and long term, potentially, what if he just let things go and things didn't work out the way he wanted to? His big goal was to settle down and find someone with certain criteria. Yet in saying that, he's got all that now. And we can start evaluating that. And that applies also before even the gym. The positive short term, going to the gym. Positive long term, it could be the health benefits, avoiding health risk, it could be getting that six pack, whatever works for that person. Negative short terms of making the change, well, there might not be a great deal. Negatives long term, there might be. Negative short term might be, well, I've got to find a night every week to go to the gym or go for a walk and I've got to get a babysitter, or it means being away from family. Or long term, it might put strain on a relationship. But then in saying that, when you evaluate that, you might think, why don't you train together? So it puts it in the cold light of day. So let me just go through the process very briefly again. Now do you understand it? When you've got your client, what you need to do with your client, identify and be very clear about the emotion, the thought, the attitude, emotion, behaviour they're considering or want to change. Once you've done that, what you can do is keeping things as they are, positive short terms, positive long term. For now, write one in each category to embed the learning. Negative short term, negative long term, write one in each category. And making the change. What I want to do is put the positives, short term, making the change, positives long term, and negative short term, making the change, negatives long term. Okay? Now that you've done that, what I want you to do is you can revisit and reevaluate in your own time, in your own pace. And you've got this. If you need any more information, email me. I've got a template if you want that, and you can go through the template. Now, like all things, it's the first time you've done it, then it can be a little bit confusing to a certain extent, but you've got the video, you can revisit and reevaluate. I'll even send you a template and you can work on that template as and when you wish, in your own time, in your own pace. Added to that, what I would say, it's just about practice. And for now, I've practiced that to begin with. And then what you can do is the next stage is looking at ways to evaluate the information. We don't have time to do that this evening, but what I will do at a certain point is I'll do a live session and I'll go into evaluating the information in more detail. Yet what I would say is going forward is when you do evaluate the pros and cons, so to speak, evaluate the short term, the long term for yourself and for the people around you. Consider what the change will mean to you, what the change will mean to the people around you, and then you've got it, what we say, in the cold light of day. And really, you consciously can make a more clearer decision, whatever that decision is, and help your clients to facilitate and take control of their own life. And focus on finding a solution rather than get bogged down on problem. My coaching philosophy is to focus 90% solution, 10% on problem. Yes, not airy fairy, problems do exist, but what I would say is not stay there, move forward, find the solution. And the secret is, as we say, is not finding the old, but creating the new and moving forward. So what I would suggest to do when you get a chance to, revisit the DVD, watch as often as you want to. Also, for the people who are students of our centre, there is an internal CPD. I'll email that to you. If you're not within our centre and you want to do the CPD, then I'll email you as well. You're more than welcome to. Yeah, it's your call in the end. But what I will do, I'll send you some information out. If you want to get in touch with me, info@excelnlp.com. We're also on Facebook and Twitter. Do get in touch. Do feel free to ask any questions. Do feel free to provide any input. What I would say going forward is practice is key. But I certainly think it's really important to, at some point within your sessions, in your case formulation, in your consultation, to give the person you're working with the opportunity to assess the situation you're in. Because like I mentioned earlier before, it's not always easy. It's not always easy making a change. What we can do is we've got to decide on the consequence of the behaviour, negative and positive. We've got to weigh it up with the emotion, the thoughts, attitude, the belief, and put it in the light of day. Let me be sure what we're considering changing is for us. A lot of people live their life based on what they think is right and wrong for them, what people tell them. I work with people who they struggle, they can't see like I'm sure they would through the trees. Should I, shouldn't I? Maybe I should, this person's this person's that. You've got to give your clients responsibility to make their own informed choice, and they've got to see it very clearly. And you might be saying at this point, what if the person decides they don't want to make the change? And that's their call. We are where we need to be at any given period of time. No one has to do anything they don't want to do. It might not be right for you, yet in saying that, in their mind, it serves them on some level. And you've got to respect and appreciate that people in life are where they are, and as a result of being where they are, it's their call what they do. Many years ago, I was working with someone who was struggling, and she was struggling with her weight, yet when we sort of put all these things down and we sort of assessed the consequence of her behaviours, she wasn't training at all or doing an exercise, she was eating the wrong foods at the wrong times, and emotionally she was feeling overwhelmed and putting herself in situations where she was becoming more and more overwhelmed. What we had to do is put everything down in the clear light of day for her to assess where she was going with things on every level and open things up. And in the end, they gave her enough leverage to start moving forward. Start moving forward and make clear, calculated decisions logically, and she would get into the best shape ever and go on to do really, really well. And this process could be used for almost anything from inside the moving house to moving to another part of the country, starting a business. It could be used the process for. I use this process whenever I do further release technique. We explore the behaviour and have a look at it, and I use it as well because they have to want to change in their own mind. I believe wanting to change, desire to change, you're halfway there. And if they don't decide they don't want to change, it's their call in the end. But I remember once I did the photo release technique. I was doing a big seminar, hundreds of people, and this guy said he had this phobia of bees, and he said there's no way he'd ever change that phobia. He'd tried and saw therapists, no one could get him over that. And I sort of stripped some of this process, and I said to him, because I listened to what he had to say, and he said he had 2 young children, and I played devil's advocate and said, if your 2 young children on the other side of the room, there's a beehive there, could you make your way across to save them if you had to? He goes, of course I could. And we're using the concept of this process in an informal way to leverage that, yeah, if you wanted to, of course he could. And when I did the photo release technique, at the end of it, he was fine. And I truly believe it wasn't the process that we did after the process, it was leveraging to demonstrate to him that it was possible. Because behaviour, as we have learned in other segments we've covered, is all learnt. It's all learnt as a general rule, and if we learn something, we can rewire it if we want to. The key is the want to, the drive, but also sometimes you might really want to do it, but you need to sort of be clear in your own mind if it's right or wrong for you. And really, you've got to give your clients, your patients, the freedom to explore and think for themselves. And as a coach or a therapist, it's really important that the people you work with, you give them enough freedom to go out there and express themselves in themselves. So it's been a fantastic evening. I've really enjoyed it. Feel free to email me. You've got my email details. I'll email you some extra resources. Do watch the DVD a few times to get your head around it all, and do use the process as and when you think is necessary. Thank you.